Gentlemen, good evening. It feels like forever, ne? All right, second press briefing in the 2021 municipal elections. As we wrap up counting, we wrap up the elections, we wrap up Yonkinto. Without much ado, welcome to the National Results Operations Center. I'm with the full leadership of the Electoral Commission, led by Dr. Masuku. Next to her is CEO, Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Simon Mabulo. Next to him is Commissioner Love, Vice Chairperson of the IEC, Chairperson of the IEC, Mr. Glenn Mashenene. Next to him is Judge Daya, Commissioner of the IEC. And then finally, Ntate Miepia, Commissioner of the IEC. We're going to be getting an update from the Electoral Commission. It's been a very, very long day, but we're good to go. CEO, as you lead the brief this evening, please update the nation.
Thank you very much, Kate, and good evening. The perennial elusive 90% is now at hand. So progress in relation to the finalization of the results now stands at 89.8% of the expected results. At the level of capturing, 99.3% of the results are already in the system, awaiting scanning and auditing. This means that of the 64,502 results expected, 64,062 have been captured into the result system. And of the 64,062 results captured, 62,539 have been audited and 58,956 have been scanned into an image and thus available to parties. The completion rate in the Northern Cape stands at 99.9%. They just have one result to conclude the process. 93.2% in the Eastern Cape. Northwest stands at 95.2%. The Western Cape, 88.8%. Mpumalanga, 91.6%. Gauteng, 90.7%. And the Free State is at 98.6%. And the completion rate in the rest of the provinces ranges between 83.9% and 88%. As we previously indicated, the Commission remains committed to finalizing the results expeditiously whilst not negating the necessity for enforcing necessary verifications. The number of completed municipalities now stands at 177 from a total of 257. Now, you may ask a question, when are we likely to conclude everything? In that regard, our position is that we will not go to bed until the results are all declared for all the municipalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, CEO. It looks like the famous night shift is coming. We're ready. We've been waiting for it. I'm going to allow the media to pose questions. If there are none as well, no problem. We're here. There's a hand from that side of the room. If I may request my colleagues to assist me. And then, yes, then we'll be good to go. Also check for me the virtual line if there are any other questions.
Thank you so much. Francis Luamachate, Progressive Independent News Agency. My question is so simple, I guess. what are the lessons learned in these elections from the challenges that you experienced as the journey gets to the end? What have you learned and what to expect in the next elections?
Evening, Nogokanya Mdambo from Jacaranda FM. Just a question on the VMDs. How do you think they fared in these elections? You were obviously trying them out for the first time. Were they effective in mitigating against voter fraud? Did you come across any glitches in those? Just take us through what it is with your experiences when it came to VMD. Thank you.
Last question from the end of the room. Yeah.
Lizega from the Mail and Guardian. Just a small question with regards to recounts. Have there been political parties which have asked for recounts, and how many recounts had you had to do in the past couple of hours?
Good evening, Sis Kate. Look on Amgoni, Power 98.7. As much as CEO, we are close to that 90% mark. eThekwini is seemingly over the electoral cycles becoming much later to get loaded into the system. Is there anything that you are picking up that is peculiar about eThekwini and why it takes so long to upload a lot of the results from that particular place?
Nani Mukati from Independent Media. CEO, you rightfully put that you will not go to bed tonight without completing those results. But can you take us in your confidence as to what timeframes are you exactly looking at, and then what is likely to happen afterwards?
Slindelo Masigane from ENCA. I know we're looking at around 19 formal complaints that have been filed with the IEC with regards to election day. I would just like to know the reasons why you can't tell us what those complaints are and who they're from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like we've covered all the questions.
Sorry, Kate.
Am I missing a hand?
Yes.
Okay. Why are they popping? All right. Okay, I've got three. Where's my colleagues?
Yeah,
You've got a mic. Thank you very much. Let's
Thank you,
proceed.
Kate. Matlasa from Eyewitness News. Just adding on to the questions by my colleague. What is the number of disputes that you have in relation to the vote count? And is there any province or in particular that stands out in terms of those disputes?
Good evening. My name is Moffat Mokwena from Channel Africa. I just want to know, did you consider the universities, the tertiary institution learners, whereby some of them, especially those who are based in Gauteng, whereby they have to travel back to as far as Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and so just to vote, because it's cost effective in terms of that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. All the questions have been covered. You've got a mic there. That's the last question. Thank you very much.
Okay, my name is Ntebo. I'm with the SABC. I'm just curious to know, I've tried to interview some political parties who are on the floor, and I was told some of them were not there because they didn't make it to Parliament. And but I was surprised that Action SA was there. So I'm just interested in knowing what qualifies political parties to be on the floor, or maybe it's just an arrangement between the IEC and Action SA after feeling that maybe they are dealt the other way by the IEC.
Thank you very much. Let me allow the CEO. I've covered all the hands that I've seen. I'm going to allow the CEO to respond, and then we'll be closing for the evening. Night shift is calling. Thank you very much. CEO?
Yeah, I think it's best that we deal with the results and not questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will help all of us. But be that as it may, what are the lessons? there are many lessons that one can immediately identify. The most obvious is never attempt to do an election of this magnitude in 42 days. If there's any advice we want to give to any election management body anywhere in the world, our perennial advice would be, don't do it. It's dangerous and may lead to disputes which may be very difficult to resolve. But having said that, we will have opportunity to debrief the elections with political parties. We will have opportunity to debrief the elections with our staff. We will look at the observers' reports, and so on and so on. And from those, then we will cull out lessons that will inform future legislative amendments and other policy adjustments that may be necessitated. The VMDs were a mainstay equipment for this election. They've given us capability that we hitherto have not had. A simple capability and ability is being able to say if a person has already voted at one station before presenting at another. A very fundamental check and balance and control measure in the electoral process. So the VMD or equivalent technology is the future. All we need to do is to deal with the glitches that we've experienced, sharpen training around it, make enhancements to the applications that are running on the machine, and so on and so on and so on. So we can't go back. We've got to move forward and ensure that we improve the proficiency of use and other related operational matters. It's been a very important national investment to fortify controls around the electoral process. The issue of the recounts and the complaints and objections, the commissioners will deal with. The slowness in eThekwini, we've been looking at the reports. The reason there is not so much capturing, they've recovered. They're lagging behind a bit with auditing. As Grenville explained earlier on, we don't want to push auditors because we want them to do a thorough job. But even with that, we are committed to ensuring that by daybreak there is an election result in all the municipalities across the country. What time frames do we have? I don't have a time frame. I have a commitment, and that commitment is let's try to push that by daybreak, at least there are results across all municipalities in the country. The problem with giving you a time frame, you're going to hold me to it. Yes, and I've bent my fingers, as it were. I don't want to do it again. Tertiary learners, we had a partnership with institutions of higher learning. And when we launched the online registration portal, we had a partnership that communicated, that enabled us to communicate directly with learners using the university or Technicon's infrastructure. In fact, emails were written to all learners with a hyperlink into our online registration portal. And that was intended to improve the rate of registration of young persons on the one hand, but also to register them within the institutions of higher learning, so that the necessity for them to travel home does not arise. So that partnership again will have to be fortified for the future. Parties that are here are parties who have participation rights in the National Party Liaison Committee. Now, there are two ways in which you gain participation in that structure. You have to, firstly, is parties that have representation in Parliament, as well as any party that applies to the Commission for co-option. So, Action SA is one such party. They applied for co-option into the structure and were then given participation rights, as it were, by the Commission. So that's the reason they are here. It has nothing to do with the dispute. In any event, the dispute was settled by a judicial structure.
Thank you, CEO. May I request, I don't know whether it's Commissioner Miepja that will deal with complaints.
Thank you very much. Program Director, good evening to you all. The question I deal with relates to the complaints and the objections received by the Commission. I want to start off by saying the electoral law is very clear, it's specific, it provides for the resolution of any issues critical in the electoral chain. In other words, when you register a voter and there's a problem, somebody says don't register, there's an objection you can put in and it must be resolved within a very specified time period. So every step in the electoral process has critical procedures where objections and complaints can be handled. Objections and complaints are not the same in law. Complaints are things where you say the presiding officer didn't smile as I expected him or her to smile. The law doesn't require them to smile or not to smile. We have to see how we deal with it. But an objection is when they do not perform their functions in terms of the law or as prescribed by the law. And when you are aggrieved, you have recourse in law for us to look at that or some specified person to look at that. Now, when you say in these elections, how many complaints have you received? There are a number of steps where complaints and objections can be dealt with and not necessarily by the Commission. I give an example. Many of the complaints and objections on election day are actually dealt with by the presiding officer. If someone must be issued with a ballot and there's another person complaining, to say that person must not for whatever reason. If 23,148 voting stations, or presiding officers rather, were going to be coming here and saying to the CEO or the Commission, look at this and look at that, we would never finish voting. But the presiding officer is required in law to look at those and to summarily deal with them. Anyone that is aggrieved by that can then deal with another set of objections I'll talk about. In that regard, the presiding officer will deal or will record every objection that he or she has dealt with in what we call a diary. Every presiding officer maintains a diary on election day. At the end of the counting process, when they finalize that process, they have a report that they make and they report that in the diary. We will know those things much later. We don't need them for now. So those we don't have, but they're recorded elsewhere. At the close of counting, of voting, counting begins, sorting of ballots, the counting process, and so on. Again, someone present in there may object. And there's a process where the counting officers must summarily look at that and decide. Again, they can't be coming here or phoning or sending things for consideration, and election will not be completed. But any person aggrieved in that process can, in fact, have recourse to the commission, which I will come to in a moment. This then brings us to what are the issues that the commission would deal with. It is possible that a presiding officer, a counting officer, or any other person, is aggrieved, puts in something in terms of the law, and someone needs to look at that. It is what the commissioners do in law. Mainly, at this point, we deal with objections known as the Section 65 objections. Objections material to the, outcome of an election or to the determination of an election result. Those are objections that have closed at 5 today. They concern any process that would involve or is potentially going to alter an outcome of an election, or one of those complaints that was resolved but someone remains aggrieved on it. That really is what we're dealing with, and that we can give you an answer because we are handling here. Earlier, before we came here, just after 7, I was informed that we have 80, just over 80. But our systems, we were still up, downloading everything that was sent. They are sent by email or delivered by hand. In the email process, there were just over 80 of them. We had begun to look at those, and we will deal with them. There's a difference between this election and the national and provincial elections in that respect. In a provincial and national election, national and provincial election, we must deal with all of them before we declare the results of an election. In this election, that requirement is slightly loosened. We can determine the results, but to the extent that an objection may change or may come and we deal with it and it changes the situation, we can then approach the electoral court and set that election result aside. I take it that I've spent some time to indicate that if you're looking for a total number of complaints and objections for the entire electoral process, we don't have it. No one in the world has it at this point. But we will have it when we debrief, when we look at how these elections have worked. And I listened to the CEO answer the question in relation of what are the things that we have learned. And I think, CEO, you did well, because those are some of the things we have to pull out and say, what was the complaint? How was it dealt with? How can we improve that? What legislation must be amended? What proposals do we make to Parliament? And so on and so forth. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Muyepia. Let us leave it at that. Let me release the leadership of the IEC. Much work ahead of the night shift. CEO and team, you are released from this press briefing. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's catch up later. Thank you.
And there you have it. We are letting the IEC get on with counting those last, or collating those last counted votes, those audit checks, making sure that everything has been checked, not once, not twice, but multiple times.